Right, you're all a bunch of idiots, and I'm gonna sort you out. Roller coaster enthusiasts like to talk about the pacing of roller coasters, but there's never been a solid definition, and people sometimes seem to be talking about slightly different things. So I wanted to be the person to give it a definition, and people should listen to me because... right, okay, everyone listen up. This will be good because it will be like last year when every video I made was a mini rant. So there's three main definitions for pacing I've heard from people. The first one is how quickly a coaster goes through its layout. Haven't heard this by too many people, but I just call that the speed it goes through an element. It's not that. Number two is how well a coaster strings together elements, how quickly it flows, and that sort of thing. And number three is Airtime Thrills' definition for pacing, which he measures in feet per second. Now, there's already a term for that. It's called average speed. Most sane people would measure it in miles per kilometre. What? And most sane people would measure it in miles per hour or kilometres per hour. No disrespect, but Big Chris is wrong. Now, in a way, it is a bit of a combination of all of them, but it's mostly the second one I talked about. Pacing is how well a roller coaster keeps its sensation of insanity, how little dead spots it has, and how it keeps your attention the whole way around the layout without giving you a break. The coasters with the best pacing tend to have a great balance of airtime, inversions, and intensity. And things like inversions aren't just used to put you upside down. They're used because of the forces they produce and the sensations they give you. And intense turns are kept interesting by linking them together with transitions and changing directions, because otherwise you just sat there being pushed into your seat for a wide turn. But really, a coaster with good pace just constantly throws something new at you. Yes, going through the elements fast does help, but it's more about the order and the way that they are linked together, so that there isn't a gap between them, and there's always something crazy going on. So, I've told you what I think pacing is, and how it can be done. So now, I'm going to show you some examples, because this video isn't long enough yet. So I'm going to show you some examples and maybe talk about some things rides use for pacing and what I think is a cool way to keep pace. Right, so here's some examples I've pulled out my arse. Let Coaster in Poland is a looping coaster with inversions as the focus, but it's not afraid to put some turns, transitions and airtime in there. The pacing was also kept by having elements tight to keep that intensity. Vekoma seems to be using these turn inversion thingies where it kind of keeps twisting a bit. It's weird to describe. So that's how Let Coaster does it. Helix at Leesburg has a variety of elements. The launchers might let down its pace a bit, but this also has a great inversion base layout with lots of airtime and pacey things in there to keep it good pace. What am I on about? Fury 325. This is an interesting one. It puts airtime on all the bankings and transitions on the ride. Now this is a giga coaster, over 300 foot, so it's really fast. And that means that the turns it's going to do aren't going to be able to be very tight because it's just got so much speed. Despite this though, it keeps changing directions and moving the train about. So the pacing is kept very good, even with the wider, longer turns. Apart from the Helix. Now I've got most roller coasters built by GCI. If you want to hear me talk about GCI, watch my last video, which is judging wood coasters POV. GCI just put airtime everywhere when it's not expected, but also when wooden coasters shake all over the place, that kind of keeps a chaotic pace and stuff. Taran at Phantasialand is a great example of how intense linked turns can keep incredible pacing with transitions, and inversions aren't needed, although they can be used as a technique. But they're not on this coaster. Taran is infamous for being an amazing coaster, and it's not hard to see why, because it has that pacing. Tiger at Linnanmäki. Well, I love this ride. I haven't been on it, but it looks cool, and it has a great variety of pacing techniques. There's transitions in there with turns, there's speed airtime hills, there's that weird bit, you know what I'm on about, the weird bit. and just the lack of time it puts between some of the bigger elements. It's good. And the last thing I've got is RMC Raptors. They just switch up the direction they're moving a lot of the time. Now I also want to talk about how a break from an insane pace can create an amazing moment on a coaster. If you have a coaster that's got a crazy, insane pace, it's really intense, it's just leaving you out of breath, and it's a bit overwhelming, I think it's a really cool idea if you can, out of nowhere, chuck some sort of maybe zero-G stall or just any zero-G moment where you're just suddenly floating out of nowhere. It's great. Good example of this is the zero-G stall on Iron Gwazi. You've got some pretty chaotic airtime moments throwing you all about the place just before you go into it. And then just for a very brief period of time, suddenly you're upside down, completely weightless, and I think that can be used as a very good break. Also, if you ramp up the pacing just that tiny bit more towards the end of a ride when it's been consistent and fast throughout, it can also really be quite great, because otherwise, if you do keep the pacing consistent throughout, then a lot of the ride is going to kind of feel a bit the same. You're not going to be surprised. If you do ramp it up just a tiny bit more at the end, then the riders could be a bit surprised because suddenly it's just that little bit more insane. I hope some of that made sense. Now I'm going to talk about something which probably also doesn't make much... I can't speak. Now I'm going to talk about something else which I'm also quite bad at explaining, and this is how the kind of newer pacing of roller coasters has been achieved lately. Roller coaster trains in the more recent years have been built to articulate more. That means they can kind of bend and move in different directions a bit more. They can go through tighter turns and maneuvers with kind of things going on more axes and things. Generally, it means roller coasters can go through tighter and twistier elements at lower speeds. Smoother track design and production has also led to coasters being able to do more whippy or sudden moments that don't break your neck. Right, that's really all I've got to say, I guess. Hope you enjoyed the past 7 minutes where I pretended to know what I was on about. The vast majority of you have probably realised that I don't know what I'm on about, but I don't care. If you want, subscribe, just do it. Just do it. I want to get to 1k. Hope you have fun when the season opens at the Alton Towers Fairground. And that's it from me. You'll see me again when I can be bothered to upload. Bye!